Welcome back, Arcadians. Alex here with another video. Now we've got some extremely rare games at the museum, from Stern's Rescue, which is a prototype game, and Nintendo Sky Skipper, which is an unreleased game, and now we're about to add another extremely rare game that I did not even know existed. That's right, this is Alca's Ping Pong from 1973, and it is first British made video game. We're back on the road again, guys, on another epic road trip. 5-hour round trip to Chester and back to pick up this elusive game. Now, I did know what to expect because I have been doing my research, but to see it in real life is something else. Wow, look at that. Look at it. A lot of you are probably asking, why do I need another Pong game? Because we already have the granddaddy of Pong games, which is Atari's Pong. Well, because I want to represent the British arcade scene, and that's really important for my museum. All I need to do now is sell it to Richard and Neil, because I'm not quite sure what they're going to think of this. I feel like Del Trotter here, turning up my freewheeler. Right, guys, got something extremely special today.
Looks old.
It's extremely old.
Heavy?
Oh my.
I saw this in a book I was just reading.
Oh,
Look at
yes.
this.
Ping Pong.
Ping Pong.
Wow.
The first British made video game.
Now, from the
How
book
cool
I
is
was
that?
reading, they had massive reliability problems.
Welcome back, Arcadians. Alex here in another video. I'm absolutely delighted to be back in the Arcade Archive with Richard. How you
Thanks,
doing,
Alex.
Richard?
Yeah, really good. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
We've got something very exciting today.
We've got something extremely exciting today, something that I thought I would never ever see in my wildest dreams, and it is Alca's Ping Pong. It came out in 1973, 6 months after Atari brought out their Pong.
That's amazing.
Which
Wow.
makes it Britain's first video game.
Yep, okay. And it was their first video game as well?
Yeah, it was their first video game. They made electromechanical games,
Yeah.
like this UFO, which was absolutely a huge machine
Wow.
that I've only ever seen in pictures. I don't think anyone's ever seen an actual cabinet. But this was at the time when Martin Bromley from Sega took over the company,
Okay.
and they were just starting to experiment with video games.
Yeah.
But I think what happened was Mike Green, who owned Alca at the time, who was running Alca, saw Nolan Bushnell showcase Pong at an event, a trade fair in London.
Oh, actually in London.
Actually
Okay,
in London,
wow.
and I think he spoke to Gary Stern, and
Yeah,
Gary Stern said, everyone's going to be making these this year.
Yeah.
You need to
tip.
get on it. So I think Mike Green went to America and sourced the PCBs directly from the factory in Boston.
Ooh, okay, yeah, because Atari had another manufacturer making the PCBs for them early on, didn't they? So,
They did.
Yeah, getting all that. That's really interesting.
Or they could have used the same manufacturer, we don't know. And this is what we're going to find out in this video, because we're going to compare this board with Atari's Pong board, because we have an Atari Pong just over there.
We do,
which is super cool.
So we can see whether or not there's any shenanigans going on
Yeah.
whether it's the same board or just a clone,
Now, there was a lot of clones being made around 1973. In fact, there was around 70,000 Pongs in circulation in 1973, and only less than 10% was made by Atari. So everyone was copying everybody else at that time, you know, to jump on the bandwagon.
They did make it quite easy because the Pong system itself is very basic, very basic circuits, just logic chips, and they stripped it down to a very low cost point.
Yeah.
So all you needed to do then is source yourself some paddles, get your coin mechs in, put a screen in, and that's quite interesting that they've gone for such a large screen in this.
Yes,
because even original Atari Pong was not that big. It was not
Right,
such a large
okay,
screen.
yeah.
So yeah, they've really done a good job of presenting this as ping pong,
Yeah.
not just pong.
Not Pong, because that was another reason why Atari didn't really get into the British market, because they were worried about the name Pong as it being a smell, as we see it in England. Okay, so they renamed it Ping Pong.
Yeah.
And because Atari were reluctant to get into the British market, it allowed companies like Alca to take advantage of that.
Yeah,
and this is exactly what they made. I think in the beginning, Mike Green brought 300 PCBs back from America, assembled this unit, and they were really an assembling company.
Yeah.
They didn't make the PCBs, but then again, a lot of companies didn't.
No, if you had that and you could build the rest of it, you've got a working machine then. So yeah, regardless of how much you had to pay to get those PCBs, it was worth it, because you're going to see that in your cash box at the end of the day, aren't you? So I'm sure they made the most of it, thinking, well, we're used to making these sort of cabinets, we'll just put them together. Yeah.
And they didn't even know how to repair the PCBs. So if one broke down in a pub or a cafe or wherever it was located, they simply just swapped the PCB out for another one.
Yeah.
And that was it.
And even in those early days, Pong still has an edge connector on, so it is actually still quite modular. They didn't wire everything on there, so it's quite an easy thing to do if there was a problem. So yeah, you can imagine that they want to keep this as much uptime as possible, get as much cash going through there, make as much money for them. But do you know how much it cost when they were originally selling?
I think he spent £30,000 on 300 PCBs, which would have been a lot at that in 1973.
That seems a lot, but yeah, okay.
So it was a bit of a gamble for him. And we've actually got an invoice here from Alca Electronics Limited for an individual IC board for ping pong for the sum of £170.50p.
And I guess everyone was after them, so maybe he had to put in a big order and get those secured for such
and
a
it was a fad, really. It only lasted around about a year, ping pong, and then people moved on or got bored of it.
They wanted something new then. They'd seen it before, and I think even Atari were trying to do a 4-player Pong, and someone beat them to market for that as well. So that's quite tough. They knew that it was going to be more than more things were going to need to be out there. So
and I love the front as well. The front looks really cool, doesn't it?
I was just looking at the gentle slope on the front here, and I wonder whether or not that's to stop people putting pints and things on.
Cigarettes
on. Just got a little bit of a slope. Instead of it being flat, or maybe it's just for the ergonomics of use. But yeah, they've done a nice job with the paddles and everything really, and it's so well built with the laminate. I think this was designed to take a bit of a bashing, I think.
And it was quite sophisticated back then as well, having something like this. People hadn't seen stuff like this before, and it kind of brought the middle classes into the pub as well, because before it was all about snooker or pool in a pub, and now you've got this space age machine in a pub, which kind of like was a little bit more inclusive with other people.
Definitely, actually being able to move and control things on a screen, very unique back in that day. There wasn't really much around that you had a real hands-on experience. There weren't any of the consoles. The Pong craze hadn't got to that point yet. So this is your first experience with it. And you could play 2-player. You had to play 2-player, which was really interesting. It's one of the first games, and it was from the start 2 players. So it was a very inclusive game to play.
Right, take the bezel off. It's a lovely bezel, no markings on this at all.
Oh, that's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you think it would have had a light? Because I just realised
I would have thought so, yeah. It would have been nice with a light.
You've got illumination there, and it's missing. So
wouldn't that be nice to put one in?
I wonder if it ever. There's no sign of it looking like it has.
But
it's got a little gap down the back, so possibly, yeah. But it looks almost like they intended.
Yeah, I wonder what it would look like. Maybe we can try a little mod on whether it's worth doing that.
Yeah, okay.
But that's nice.
Right. So straight away we see some 1970s fake wood plastic around the side.
That is so 70s, isn't it?
It really
Look at
is. Yeah, they've screwed straight into the TV's bezel, which is interesting, really. They've sort of just got it in there, hacked it in with a bit of. Actually, that's just a bit of bent metal. And actually, the chassis has been the enclosure for the TV has been taken off. You've got all these extra little bits of plastic just sticking out. So we won't find much at the back, I don't think. But yeah, they've obviously used that as a way to line it up, get it into the centre of the screen.
They've literally built the cabinet around the TV, haven't they?
It looks that way, doesn't it? Yeah, because you've got everything jammed in there. These are all screwed in. They don't even look like they've ever been taken off. Maybe not been changed very much at all.
And then the coin mech here, we've got 2 slots here for a 5 and 10 pence.
Yeah, very basic coin mech. That's just going to be a real basic coin comparator, and it's just going to open a switch and run the game. So I think it's going to be interesting that, yeah, they've got 2 in here, but it's just for the 2 different coins.
Yeah, should we open that up?
Yeah, let's look.
Oh, well, that's...
Okay, that's pretty basic, straightforward. See if it's got any markings on it. Don't see
Where is it
any.
made? It's got American keys, so we're thinking it would be imported from America, the whole unit.
Yeah, that is a really basic, that really is. All it is a switch. So that's purely working on the fact that it's the physical slot size for a 5p and a physical slot size for a 10p. So you could pretty much put anything in there as long as it was that size and the right weight, because all that's doing is flicking your switch. There's no comparator or there's nothing going on there really. So it's very basic indeed. But I guess people weren't trying to, they weren't aware of maybe cheating the machine at these such early days. It was just a case of that's where the slot is, I'm going to put my money in and play it.
But they made electromechanical games, so they might have had an idea of some sort.
Possibly, yeah. But these are very basic. Probably just very cheap and cheerful, to be honest. I think that's quite... Yeah, it has got a little weighting, so I think it is working on a weighting side. So
so it had
it's
the
got,
same
size,
weight.
same weight, and then it's going to give you a valid click at the bottom there. Click the micro switch and away you go.
Yeah.
And it's got 2 chutes, so we're collecting all the cash down the bottom there.
Come out here, so
so that's pretty easy there. And
let's have a look at the bottom.
Yeah.
Nice design on here.
Yeah, it's just basic spray paint on there, isn't it? But
there we go. And that's how you got your money out through here.
Yeah.
Any money in there? No, we're empty. Very rusty box, that one.
Yeah.
Cheap metal.
basic,
You think they would have coated that because it's not damp. Hasn't got damp. It's just atmospheric kind of.
Yeah, just a little
rust.
oxidised. Yeah. It's going straight in, and then you can just see the coin spinners, the dial spinners underneath, which is.
Because I know when Atari first put their Pong on location, they had to check it at least twice a day because the coins were literally pouring out of the machine.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Plugging it up.
Yeah, because it's being used for so long. And Pong itself is a time game, get to a score, so it's never going to be, you're never going to be on it for a very, very long time. You're going to be either off and the next player's on. So there's always going to be coins coming in while it's popular, as you say, for that first year.
Now these dials, these spinners here, Richard, how do they differ from the Atari ones?
I think they're going to be very, very similar because back in these early days, they had potentiometers, variable resistors that usually went about 270 degrees. They sort of went from one side all the way around to the other and stopped. But as the story goes, in the early days of testing Pong, they put these spinners in that stopped at both ends. And if the paddle was on the screen and people thought they needed to pull it down, if that meant it went past the end stop, they would often keep on turning it and it would break the paddle because they were trying to pull the paddle down the screen or up the screen. So what they actually ended up doing is put a little clutch mechanism in that allowed them to spin them all the way around, and it just keeps on going. So it means that you're not going to break it. So there's a little bit of mechanical clutch underneath that just allows them to do that, and we've seen that on the other Pong as well, the original Pong. So I think that's really there just to make them last a bit longer.
Yeah, they don't feel as good a quality as the Atari ones.
They don't feel like spinners. No, they don't. I think you would.
It's a bit of friction.
Yeah,
there,
there's a little bit of friction there.
But I don't know.
But they feel a bit cheaper, not quite as weighty, and definitely they're a bit loose. But that could be just from years of use, I suppose.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, they're not quite high quality as the Atari ones.
So we managed to get the key in the lock eventually.
Yeah. Finally
Worked out
figured out
what
how
key it
these
is.
keys work, and we can get this one open. So yeah, very simple panel.
Wow, look at this.
Okay. Oh wow. Okay, so that is made in Great Britain. Thorn Consumer Electronics Limited. Yeah, really interesting. So this is basically a consumer set. Quite short again. We've got a very narrow tube, which is good, but they're obviously getting a bit tight on the back here. Not a lot.
Yeah, well, I've read that they forgot about the back bit when they made the cabinet.
Brilliant. Okay.
Because there was an actual square. Do you remember those square bits at the back?
Yeah,
and they've literally just sawn that
poke
off.
out. Yeah.
And then they've sold whatever parts were left over to another company. But yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, they've left the most dangerous bit exposed.
Yeah.
There we go. I guess
That's
you just need to be careful.
Yeah.
And yeah, from what I can see, oh wow, yeah. So you've actually got the front panel of the television screwed to the base.
Oh wow, so it's upside down.
It's been hacked off the front and put on the bottom. So that's really interesting. So you've got your on-off switch.
Oh, I see.
You've got your buttons and you've got your contrast and brightness. So you can tweak your brightness, but it must be fixed input.
And you've got a spot there for the aerial.
Yes, yeah. That's amazing. So yeah, so these buttons are no longer used for switching your channels. It's just going directly into your aerial input.
We've got, what have we got here? Volume, brightness,
contrast. We've got hold, vert, contrast.
I noticed some relays here, Richard. What are these relays doing? What do we need a relay in a game like this for?
I think the clue is at the front where it says when you deposit the coin, the bats will appear. And I think all that's basically doing is the coin mech is switching this relay on and probably turning on the electronics. Because the Pong electronics itself can be just switched on and off, and it's always in a ready to run state. So when you turn it on, all the scores will be blank, you'll play it, and that relay will then drop off and it'll probably turn off again. I think that's all they're doing, is they're probably just switching on. There's probably one for each coin mech, depending on whether it's 1 or 2 player. So yeah, very easy to service. There's not a lot in there. It's all been quite neatly wired. All got the 1970s lacing on there on the wiring looms. So even when I was back in college, we were learnt how to do lacing on wiring, which you don't do that anymore, you use tie wraps. But yeah, really interesting that they've done all that way. And yeah, very simple. We've just got the 2 spinners at the front. We've got the push button and the coin mechs. And then we've got a little connector down the bottom and the world's most smallest transformer, which is really tiny, but it didn't need a lot of power. The board was very just logic chips. So there's not a lot of power being used.
We are going to look at the PCB now, the Pong clone.
The Pong clone, or is it?
Let's find out. Yeah. Look at the size of that capacitor.
That is pretty big, isn't it? Yes, they made
that is just a bit of veneer that come off the side.
That's just the bit on the side there.
We'll have a look at these a little bit later, but let's just have a look at this board first.
So it's been a little while since I looked in the back of the other Pong, but it does look incredibly familiar. I can already see this switch, which we know was on the original Pongs, and that set it to the score, the high score of being either 11 or 15. So we know that that's there, and that's definitely in the other one. So
you could have 11 games or 15 games.
Yeah, right? up to the score before it declared you the winner. So basically, yes, if you get to 11 or 15. And that was really the operator's choice. If they wanted a quicker game, they'd stick it on 11. You get more plays for your hour of play, and then 15 if you wanted to be a little bit more generous with your players. So yeah, you've got your edge finger connector here, which has just basically got power coming in, the signal coming out, and then all that logic, which is actually not very much at all. That's really been cut way down. The logic on a Pong board is very basic. I mean, you could do that obviously in a single chip nowadays. But
so there's no code on there as such,
no code, no. This is all basically running as blocks of generated images that happen to work as the paddles going up and down and controlled by the potentiometers, which are basically just varying a signal to give you those up and down bats, and then the interaction of the ball, which is just another dot.
So it was
yeah.
easy technology. It wasn't groundbreaking technology at the time.
No,
it was already around in other forms.
No, that's it, yeah.
So it was easy to clone
Yeah,
in a way.
definitely. I mean, some of these little transistors on here are from the very late 60s. That's like 1969. So all of this is really quite proven technology. It was all of this was used in the space shuttle and everything else to get you there. So nothing that revolutionary. It was all being well mass produced at that point, and you could go to a number of different manufacturers and get these logic chips, make these boards. And I bet the first clones were people actually taking these boards, taking all the chips off, recreating this artwork, making their own PCBs and putting all the chips back on and mass producing them. So not very difficult at all. You could clone that in one afternoon, even today, very easily.
I think that's why a lot of companies moved away from electromechanical games, because they took so much time, so much effort and so much money to make. Now suddenly you could make money elsewhere by making this.
Yeah, these are mass produced in a factory, and they'll be churning these out, and actually then all you need to do is set your wiring loom up, get your cabinet ready, plug that in, and you're way to go. So yeah, however much these cost, they were worth it back in those days, because they were bringing in so much money. So yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to see what markings we've got on this and whether or not we think that this actually came from the factory in America.
Yeah. Well, should we compare it with the Atari Pong, see what the differences are? This is the Atari one.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Actually, although the boards, they look different sizes, when you line up the chips, the actual artwork is the same.
Oh, I see, that outline,
so
that border.
the actual outline and the tracking, if you look at the tracks here and here, look, you've got Pong Syzygy, so that is the official one from Atari, manufactured either under licensed or by them, depending on how old that machine is. And then this is done from the same artwork. You can tell exactly the same traces all the way through. So it's either a very, very good copy or pretty much a one-to-one copy.
Because at this time, Atari couldn't keep up with demand. This is why there were so many other manufacturers creating Pong, because they just couldn't fill the market. I mean, this is a time when Atari just didn't have the capabilities, the employees.
They just weren't geared up for that success, were they?
They weren't, no.
Yeah, they were pulling people in off the streets to help build the cabinets, to pull everything together.
Exactly, and they would have maybe outsourced the PCBs to a third company.
They did, yeah. For quite a lot of the early years, they did that. They only started taking control of the electronics side themselves a little bit later on, and by that point, there'd already been quite an established industry. Of people wanting to have those electronics made for their cabinets and other cabinets as well. So
what we was trying to establish here was, did Michael Green go to Boston and go to the exact same factory that Atari were using to create their Pong boards? And that's why we're trying to compare these two.
I suppose it wouldn't have taken long, even for a competing factory down the road. Look, this is ever so slightly different on the back. Not much at all. But even on here, look, you've got one extra ground connection. And actually, that's interesting. I wonder if those edge fingers, they're about the same. So it's very close, but slightly different styles on the artwork. You've got a little bit more wobbly lines here and a little bit more detailed. This was before the days that everything was on a 45-degree chamfer, which you've got some 45-degree angles here, but if you look on this board, just got curves everywhere. So this is all done by hand, all of this drawing.
Wow.
There weren't computers around to help assist you with that. That was all Letraset.
That's incredible.
And all of these little lines were drawn, and then the mask was produced to actually etch away that copper. So it wouldn't have been very difficult for someone to take that as a starting point and create one very, very close, very similar, and just do the artwork
they could have
themselves.
done, this company that created these boards could have done a batch of, say, 500 as a prototype batch, then realise actually we can improve on that. But Alca, you have our first batch.
Yeah.
And we'll give this to Atari because they're paying us more money, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know what's happened, do you?
No,
really?
no. I mean,
because companies do evolve, don't they, with what they're creating and make it better.
I think so. Yeah. If I had to take a guess, I would say I'm even thinking that this might have been a board that was made here in the UK, just from the style of these lines and artwork that's on there. If that one we know has come from the USA, which it is because it's got the Syzygy name on it.
It's got Syzygy here.
I think maybe they brought some in and then they realised they could make them themselves. So this could be a little bit later on where they've made them themselves. Be interesting to look closely at these chips and see whether any of these give us any indications of whether they've got them more from more common supplies. There wasn't that many around, but they could have got them from places other than the United States. So yeah, it'd be interesting to.
There is some markings here, isn't there? What was that? Do you think that's the manufacturer of the PCB? These markings here. Yeah,
that's been added on as the rev of the artworks. You've got a rev A there. Yeah. So yeah, there's a few things on there. And they've obviously removed that Pong Syzygy or never put it on in the first place. So that's fair enough.
Well, in comparison, Richard, which do you prefer?
I think, honestly, I like the original Pong from a style, design, simplicity point of view, but the Alca's got such a unique character and class to it.
It's got a smile on its face.
It does. It's chirpy. It's 1970s. Look at it. It just looks amazing.
It's the sort of thing you'd find in a Carry On movie in a campsite somewhere.
Font is definitely, and the choice of colours, it couldn't be any more different, really.
No.
But
for the British market, it suits.
Yeah, for the British market, and I'm seriously impressed that that large screen. We know that Pong had different size screens. We've seen them with these small screens and slightly larger, but nothing as big as that. So I'm pretty impressed that they were getting out a big screen, very clear view for people, and it just looks the part, really.
It does.
Yeah.
Now, with the screens being different, they're different sizes, obviously, but. That's NTSC, this would be PAL, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
would the board have to accommodate that in one way or another?
Yes, there's a slightly different clock frequency for the two signals that are coming in, but they are very, very similar back in those days with the old RF signal. So it's not a huge difference, but yeah, they would have been slight modifications on the board to run on the British-made TVs.
So they would have had to ask the factory to modify that for the British TVs.
Or they did it here. It might just be a small tweak of a timing circuit on one of these boards. But we can certainly look at that when we take a deeper look into getting the ping pong up and running. Yeah.
So to get this up and running, what's your first steps, Richard? Look at the TV first?
No, as always, start from your mains plug.
Yeah.
We've got to change that because that's a really old-fashioned plug and the cable's knackered. Check your transformer, make sure you're getting some sensible voltages out of that. Check that it's going to the TV.
Yeah.
We probably want to get the TV out just to make sure that there's no cracked joints, there's no leaking capacitors, there's no issues in there. Then you can risk, check for shorts, and then you can risk turning the TV on, like we did with this one, and that came back into life. After that, then really, we can just check the electronics out on the board. There's only a few things really on there you've got to look out for. Some of the diodes go a little bit bad over time. And after that, try it on and then tune it in. So there's not many things to tune. It'll basically be tuning the TV into the signal. Yeah. That should be enough to get it up and running.
Oh, well, I can't wait because this, for us, for the museum, is a fantastic addition to have, to represent the British scene. And this is such a rare cabinet. There's only 2 known of these Alca Ping Pongs known to exist, so it's great to have this. I know it's also nice to have the Atari Pong, but for me, representing the British arcade scene is just as important.
Is it your Grail cab or not quite that? It's not quite that important.
It's not, I wouldn't have it in my arcade. Put it that
fair
way.
Enough. That's fair enough.
I think it's great for the museum.
I agree. I think it's a wonderful start from a company we're only just now starting to appreciate and understand.
Yeah.
Alca was a really important kicking point for the industry back in those early days.
And the fact that they were owned by Martin Bromley of Sega makes it
yeah.
from a sort of...
you can see why it got that momentum to get going, can't you? And make some money. And you were saying, how many people did it employ?
300 people.
300 people. So that, I mean,
their height,
and that's all off of the back of probably this and maybe a few of their other games.
And they went down around about 1982 because they were bootlegging so many of Sega's games. Sega ended up taking Alca to court. They lost, and Martin Bromley pulled the plug and said, "I'm having nothing to do with it."
Okay, that's fair enough. They had a good run then. They employed all those people. And they got some good machines out there. Maybe that's why there's not so many that still exist of these types of things.
Yeah.
Just got scrapped
smashed
or
up.
broken down, yeah. So.
Now it's going to take us a time to get to work on this because we've got so many other projects in the museum. We're still working on the Atari Sprint. I'm also working on the Neo Geo Lord's Vale. So hoping to get those two up and running. But we will come back to ping pong at some point and get this working.
Yeah, I think it needs just as much cosmetic work. There's a little bit of gluing and cleaning and screwing,
but not too much.
Not too much. So I think that's going to be a good project to get stuck into. We might be able to do the whole lot in one go, all the electronics, all the wiring, all the cosmetics, and get it back to its former glory.
Yeah.
And maybe it can sit next to Pong in the arcades sooner rather than later. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for watching, guys. Thank you, Richard, for joining me on this one.
No, it's been a real pleasure.
Yeah.
I'm dying to find out a bit more about Alca, so I'm going to do some research. Hopefully in the future we'll see more about them.
The book by Alan Meads, Arcade Britannia. Can't recommend that enough. It tells the whole history of Britain's arcade scene. So have a look at that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.
See you.
Since making this video, new information has come to light. My research has taken me all around the world to a collector in the United States of America, Andy Welburn, well known amongst the arcade community for his documentation of these early arcade and Pong boards. We can now confirm that the Alca Ping Pong boards did not come from the same factory that Atari made their Pong boards, but from the same factory that Williams made their version of Pong, which was paddleball. The two boards are identical and identifiable by not only the elongation and shape of the boards, but also by the etching of the CC1 number that you see at the top right hand of the board. These are exactly the same as the Alca boards. So we can now confirm that Mike Green went to the factory in Boston where Williams had licensed to make the Pong boards with Atari and sourced exactly the same boards as Williams. I'd like to thank Andy Welburn from Andy's Arcade for this new information. I'd also like to thank Alan Meads for all the information that he has given us in his fabulous book, Arcade Britannia. I recommend it to anyone who has any interest in the arcade scene in Britain that was around from the early 60s right up to the late 80s.